Good morning and welcome, my friends. Yes, this is a live edition of Flipside Live coming to you on this Wednesday morning, shortly after 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Robbie Noel broadcasting live from Rosarito Beach, Mexico. And I'm going to attempt to do something. I'm not sure if it's going to be successful, but we'll give it our best shot. This is
I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, again, one of our most popular guests. His name is John Williams of Shadowstats.com. John Williams, thank you for joining us today on USA Watchdog.
Greg, thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be with you again.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm very excited in kind of a bad way, because your thesis about what could happen and how this hyperinflation starts isn't about, labor costs going up. It isn't about any of your traditional ways of thinking. It's about the trillions and trillions of dollars held outside the country and somebody running for the exit door and dumping this stuff. Now, what's going on in Ukraine is providing a geopolitical trigger, not an economic trigger. The Russians are saying that, hey, listen, America, if you put sanctions on us, we're going to crash your financial system, and we're going to sell all of our dollar reserve currency assets. Could they crash the U.S. financial system by dumping their, $200 or $300 billion in treasury bonds?
Yes, it certainly has the potential to do that. Looking outside the United States, there's something over $16 trillion of cash or near cash. And that's effectively the same size as our GDP, and about the same size as our broadest money supply measure, M3, which the Fed doesn't track anymore, which I do. Nobody's wanted to hold the dollar here for some time. The dollar fundamentally is weak. It couldn't be weaker. All the major factors are against it. Just a matter of what would actually trigger the massive selling. Nobody wants to hold it. The Russians start selling. You have China, which has indicated a general alliance here in terms of what's transpiring. If the rest of the world believes this is going to happen, people who've been wanting to get out of the dollar for some time very easily could front-run the Russians. The scare is on. People will try and get out of it as rapidly as they can. It'd be disastrous for our markets. All those excess dollars coming in, the bonds being sold, interest rates will spike. Stock market would sell off, and we'd see inflation. But to prevent that, to try and keep things stable, the Fed would tend to buy up those treasuries, intervene wherever it could to stabilize the circumstance. And it's going to be very difficult, and it's going to be very inflationary. What you have to keep in mind is that back in 2008, we had one of the greatest financial crises the United States ever faced. The system was on the brink of collapse at that point in time. What the Fed did, what the federal government did, was they spent every penny they could, anything they could create, guarantee. They bought up big companies that were key to the system. They did everything they could possibly do to keep the system from crashing. They guaranteed all bank accounts. So they saved the system. But now, what they did has not borne fruit. We've not seen an economic recovery. We've not seen a return of health to the banking system. And so the system is very vulnerable, and you get something here, if the Russians really carried through on their threat, you have the risk of indeed collapsing the system.
This would be the end of the world as we know it in the U.S.
If it works out, if you follow through, and it does have the effect of creating a hyperinflation, which I think it would. There are any number of things that could have triggered the sell-off and the flight from the dollar, such as a bad economic statistic or some blunder in Washington. It's a type of circumstance that will not allow life to continue as we know it, because the U.S. is not able to handle hyperinflation. We're not structured for it. Unlike Zimbabwe, which had probably the worst hyperinflation anyone's ever seen, they were still able to function for a while with the economy. People continued to work. They get paid in what was rapidly depreciating currency. I mean, so rapid that it almost became worth like toilet paper overnight. They would go to a black market and exchange it for dollars. We don't have a black market to escape from our dollars with. Gold is probably the closest thing to that. Gold will tend to rally here as the dollar sells off, barring very heavy intervention by the central banks, which you may see. But the fundamentals will eventually dominate, and you'll see a very weak dollar and very strong gold coming out of this.
Could there be a run on gold, a flight to gold, a run to gold? Not a run on gold, not people selling, people running to buy it.
We've already seen some of that. Historically, the U.S. used to be the traditional safe haven in a political or financial crisis, but that hasn't been the case for 4 or 5 years now. Instead, what you've seen is that the flight to safety has been into other traditional safe havens, such as gold, such as the Swiss franc. But the dollar has lost its magic there. Again, nobody wants to hold it. So if the Russians follow through in this, or can convince the rest of the world that they're going to do it, if it looks like China may join them, there are a lot of countries that are looking to dump dollars and get out of there ahead of the crowd.
16 trillion U.S. dollar or liquid dollar assets held outside the country.
Yes,
that's a lot of stuff to dump.
It is.
Well, the dollar. Go ahead.
No,
the dollar hasn't been. Last week it was down 0.5% in a day. It's down below 80. I've been following your reports, and either things are revised lower or coming in lower. It looks like the economy is rolling over. This couldn't come at a worse time. What's your appraisal of the economy?
It is rolling over. The numbers are showing that we're starting into a new recession. What will be a formal recession. We should have an actual quarterly contraction in the first quarter GDP. One of the better leading indicators to things like that is retail sales, and that gave a clear recession signal in January. It was the strongest recession signal seen since September of 2007, which was 3 months before the official 2007, what some people call the Great Recession, took place. I'll contend it never ended. What we're seeing here is really a double dip. But however they record it, the economy is turning down again. That's bad for the dollar. It's bad for the markets. It's bad for the budget deficit, because all the forecasts on the budget deficit are based on positive economic growth going forward. All the sensitivities, all the crises that are in place have been in balance, very delicate balance. And something like this just throws the whole system out of whack and can have a lot of unintended consequences.
So it looks like your predictions for the beginning of hyperinflation are going to be dead on. They start here in 2014, either with a financial trigger or this geopolitical trigger in the Ukraine.
Well, it's the dollar's been vulnerable here for some time. All the major fundamentals have been more negative, and it's just a matter of what triggered it first. This looks like a good candidate for doing it.
John Williams, thank you so much for being on USAWatchdog.com and telling us what's going on with this Ukrainian situation.
Always a pleasure.
Well, there you go, my friends. John Williams speaking with Greg Hunter. And let me just add that I've been following John Williams for many years, and he, like many others that I follow, has been right more often than he has been wrong. Our good friends over at Dollar Vigilante have a very similar editorial today talking about the possibility of, if sanctions are imposed against Russia, as many in Congress seem to want to do, there's no question the possibility of a serious retaliation by Russia is a distinct possibility, and this even according to a Kremlin economist, Sergei Glaziev. He told the Russian media last night that if sanctions were imposed, this has the distinct possibility of leading to a crash of the U.S. financial system. And he didn't mince any words. He said we would find a way not just to reduce our dependency on the United States to zero, but to emerge from these sanctions with great benefit for ourselves. Since sanctions were first rattled in the media, the EU has backed off the notion, considering that Russia is its third largest trading partner. Sanctions would do damage to both Russia and Western nations, as most experts all agree. The U.S. government, almost always the dumbest in the room, has nonetheless not led up on its call for sanctions. If sanctions are applied against state structures, the Russian economist said, we will be forced to recognize the impossibility of repayment of the loans that the U.S. banks gave to Russian structures. Indeed, sanctions are a double-edged weapon, and if the U.S. chooses to freeze our assets, then our equities and liabilities in dollars will also be frozen. This means that our banks and businesses will not return the loans to our American partners. Glaziev, who was speaking in the capacity of an academic and not a policymaker, said that Russia would likely be forced to dump the dollar in order to reduce the dependency of the U.S. financial system. You can find that interview and Greg Hunter's discussion with John Williams posted on my website at robbyknoll.com. You will also find an editorial today by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, where Eric King asks him whether or not the Ukraine crisis is worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis, because this brings back some terrifying memories for people that lived through that pivotal, dangerous moment in history. Dr. Roberts' response to Eric King was, on one level, it's the same thing. We had the threat of Soviet missile bases 90 miles from our border. What we are doing now is the beginning stage of what Khrushchev was attempting in Cuba. And Khrushchev's response was to the fact that American missiles that were put in Turkey on Russia's border, so he said it was okay if Russia put them in Cuba. Well, now we have missile bases on Russia's border with Poland. If we added the Ukraine, it's like giving Russia 2 doses of Cuba. And Ukraine is a far greater strategic importance to Russia than it is to the United States. So the risks here are much higher for that very reason alone. Dr. Roberts is also concerned with another reason, and that is quite simply that the quality of American leadership today is not anywhere close to what it was when John F. Kennedy was president. Kennedy managed to contain the situation. He stood up to the warmongers, the neocons, if you will, to the generals, to the back-channeled communications with Khrushchev. Khrushchev agreed to take the missiles out of Cuba, and Kennedy would quietly, 6 months later, take the American missiles out of Turkey. This was not part of the official announcement, but it was part of the secret agreement. Kennedy kept his word and removed the missiles from Turkey 6 months later. So Khrushchev and Kennedy worked it out. But in those days, we didn't have the flawed ideology of American hegemony over the entire world. We also didn't have the arrogance and hubris of the claims made by President Obama that we are an exceptional people and an indispensable nation. Kennedy didn't talk like that. He didn't think that. But when you think that way and you have this ideology of hegemony of the entire world, you are not going to back down. If you have all these generals telling you we can whip them, it creates a much more dangerous environment. There was a paper published by 2 of these Dr. Strangelove types that claimed we were so far ahead of the Russian military that we could preemptively attack them with nuclear weapons at no consequence to ourselves. These people are so divorced from reality that they are delusional. But more important, these people are incredibly dangerous. Now, if people are telling the President and the State Department that they are going to be more reckless than if somebody is saying, you've got to calm this down, the Russians hear the Western propaganda with people on TV saying things like, let's send troops to Poland and our Navy to the Black Sea. Well, I can assure you that that is not what the Russians heard during the missile crisis. That article, together with a few others, you will find posted on my webpage today over at RobbieNoel.com. And it seems as though the internet gods have been with us this morning and have allowed this podcast to proceed without any interruption. So it's the start of what hopefully is going to turn out to be a good day. Currently, the Dow is off marginally based on the ADP report. Likewise, gold and silver are also marginally higher. And this is just a quick reminder and plug, if you will, for Flying Eagle Gold and Silver. If you want to talk to myself personally, or Jeffrey Bennett. You can call us anywhere within the continental U.S. at 855-289-7587. That's a toll-free number. If you prefer to correspond via email, you can find both Jeffrey's and my email. All you have to do is go to my webpage at robbyknoll.com, scroll down the page, and under the logo of Flying Eagle Gold and Silver, just click on either Jeffrey's name or my name, and that will automatically take you to your email page. And believe it or not, we both do respond to requests for information we get from folks who have questions. As I've said numerous times before, not all gold companies are created equal. I've actually been amazed by the numerous reports I have seen of late exposing big box coin stores and the games they play with clients who unfortunately sometimes get caught up in the emotion of buying gold and silver, and so they never really ever figure out that they paid too much. That reality only usually comes home to roost when they attempt to sell their gold and silver. So if you want to get realistic, real-world prices for delivery of gold and silver, and also help keep the micro effect on air, give Jeffrey Bennett or myself a call at 855-289-7587. I'm not going to push my luck any further with today's podcast. So far, we've had no technical interruptions. And hopefully it'll continue for the rest of the day. And we'll wrap up the day's events on my afternoon show at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time over at the Micro Effect. You can find links to that on my webpage. So till then, my friends, see you